Thank you.
All right, no problem.
There was one question, just real quick. There was a question from Ambika about once you save a setting, will it be available for all the other courses? If it's and then secondary question, if it's in a Blueprint Canvas course, will it push the settings to the other courses and exams?
Got you. Great question. So each the settings are not by the instructor, they are per course. So you would have to set up your settings in each course that you would like to use. They won't, cross courses. And I would have to double check on the Blueprint. I do not believe it would be automatically pushed to Blueprint exams. However, I'll have to double check and get back to you on that in a follow-up after today. Sorry about that. All right. All right, so that is the exam profiles feature that we have set up for you. So next, we'll go or dive into these settings and explain a little bit further about what each of these does. So up here at the top, you'll notice this critical session recipient drop-down menu. Now, this is basically the area that you would want your email address. Repeat the introduction. And for the sake of time, I don't want to go over, and actually do have a hard stop at 2. So I don't really want to repeat the beginning. What I can do, I can include a video that will show you those that portion, or the main menu portion, in my follow-up. So that I think that should suffice for you. So I apologize for not being able to repeat, but yeah, I think that would be the best way to go forward.
Austin, for maybe could you just provide some quick context for anyone that's joining the recording right now, where you are in the stage of Honorlock? I see you're in settings, so you clicked on Honorlock from your navigation, which you've already enabled into your navigation.
Yeah, I can do that part really quick, at least. Yeah, just to go back into the
just
exam.
to make sure people know what they're looking at.
Got you. That makes sense. Sure. So yeah. So basically, the only thing you would have missed if you did just hop in was adding Honorlock to your course, but that's very quick. And basically, this is what you get after you do that. So once it's added to your course, it will show up over here to the left. And then when you click on the Honorlock LTI, all of your exams will be pulled in automatically. And they will have this blue enable button right here next to the exam in order to set up your Honorlock settings. So then that basically takes us back to where we just were. So we clicked on enable, and then we're here in the settings page. So up here at the top, this critical session recipients drop-down menu, this is where you'll want to include whoever it will be reviewing these sessions. So most likely it will be yourself as the instructor, and you should automatically show up here within this drop-down menu. If you're not the first one on the list, you should be able to click on it, and you should be in that list down at the bottom. But basically what that does is if we were ever to confirm a violation, or if we see any suspicious activity that we feel needs to be reported or directly to the instructor for review, this is how those emails are received. So that's specifically if one of our pop-in proctors were to see a violation or some type of suspicious behavior. So you'll want your email address in there at the top. Okay, and then next are the proctoring settings. So I'll start here first at record webcam. A lot of these are pretty straightforward, but I do feel they need a little bit further explanation. So the record webcam will record an HD video of the student's face and their testing environment using the webcam built into their device, or an external webcam as well. That is compatible with Honorlock as well. Then next you'll see record screen, which another straightforward one that will require the student to share their screen with Honorlock and Chrome, and that'll record an HD video of the exam taker's laptop or desktop screen. Record web traffic, that will log and monitor all of the browser activity within Google Chrome during the exam. So you probably noticed I did say Google Chrome specifically, and that is because Honorlock is a Chrome extension for students. So they are required to use Google Chrome as their browser if they're taking an Honorlock enabled exam. So that's something that you definitely want to make your students aware of. Now, that being said, instructors are able to use any browser they would like because they are not required to have the extension installed in order to access this Honorlock LTI here. And then next we see student photo. So the student photo will require the exam taker to take a still picture, basically just a student selfie prior to taking their assessment. Now, this student photo, we are not using any type of facial recognition technology on their photo, nor are we even scanning their photo at all on the ID when these pictures are taken. What we're doing during this step, this is basically just for the instructor's verification that it is the correct student taking the exam during your review process. So that's definitely not being matched up to any known databases or anything of that nature. And for student ID, we do require the exam taker to take a picture with their webcam of either their government issued photo ID, we do accept government issued photo IDs, or their student photo ID as well. And what Honorlock will do here is just ensure that the name on the student's ID matches the name of the student within Canvas. So again, we're not scanning the student's photo on their ID, but we do require a photo ID just in case there are any manual verification situations that will arise. And one of our certified support agents will be able to at least know that it is the correct student taking the exam. So these settings, I'm just answering your question here in the chat. Do any of these settings require students to do anything on their end? So yes, these here, but let's see, which ones are they? 1, 2. So basically, if for record screen, student photo, student ID, and the room scan will have an effect on the authentication process. I'm going to keep all of these enabled for this exam, and I'm going to actually show you the student side of things, because I think it's really good to get a feel for what the students have to go through in order to take an Honorlock enabled exam. So you're going to be able to see what each one of these requires a student to do during that process.
Austin, there was one question in the chat about how Honorlock protects students' privacy, and I don't know if you could quickly speak to how Honorlock might be different from other similar proctoring tools that are out there, such as Proctorio, how Honorlock might be different in terms of protecting student privacy.
I don't know if I could necessarily speak to the differences because I'm not well versed on what others do, but I can definitely tell you how we protect students' privacy. Very briefly, it's kind of technical for me, but we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. So basically, we do monitor like. Well, let me back up there. We don't monitor what's on a student's device. That's the opposite of what I was trying to say. But basically, since we are a Chrome extension, we don't even have insight into what a student has on their device past their browser. So really the only things we're capable of seeing are like extensions that are installed on the student's browser, things of that nature, but we don't get any type of information as far as like what a student has installed on the device itself. I hope that it helps a little bit, but I can send you some privacy resources that'll probably explain that a little bit better than I'm able to on the fly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. And then I do see the question from Michelle that sometimes students have preferred names in Canvas that may not match the name on their official ID. So that's a great question, and we've seen that plenty before. So the way we kind of combat that, as long as the student like has their name within Canvas somewhere, we actually check all of those. So we check their actual name, we do check their preferred name, and I think maybe nickname or something like that, or that could be another LMS, but we will check each name of the student and what we matched up to all of those options. So, but if there is a case where a student doesn't have that name at all within Canvas that's listed on their ID, that will prompt them to basically go to our manual verification queue, and it'll connect them with one of our support agents, and they'll be able to manually verify that ID for them. All right. So I was on the room scan step. So next is the room scan option here. So that will require that the exam taker would show a 360-degree view of their testing environment. There will be on-screen messaging informing them of how to do this. So if you're requesting that your exam takers show certain items during the room scan, such as blank scratch paper, maybe their cell phone being turned off and placed out of reach, things like that, you can always use this additional instructions section down here below this section here in order to explain to your students what you would like them to complete during the room scan. So I'm going to go into this a little bit more in depth in a little bit, but that is where I would suggest putting any further instruction that you would like to relay to your students as far as the room scan goes. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that during the room scan, now our AI is not fully engaged during this portion of authentication. The reason being is the student will, most likely they obviously have to do a 360 scan, so their face will go out of view within the webcam. So if they're in their exam and that happens, we actually will pause their exam, tell them to go back within view. So that's why that's deactivated during the room scan. So the only thing that we can actually detect during this room scan would be if there is a third-party face present, so a secondary face, I should say. If we detect that, that is possible to detect during the room scan, but any other AI-related flags will be deactivated during that time. Clicked on room scan. So yeah, so in order to add anything to the additional instructions, that'll actually be down here below the student guidelines section. And it's a little drop down menu. So if you don't see it initially, you just have to click on this little plus and that will show up. You're very welcome. And for Lena, how much time should we tell students to allow for the verifications before they begin a timed exam? That's a great question. So it really takes less than a minute. It's once they're comfortable with Honorlock, it can take longer, of course, if it's their first time, using Honorlock. But that is why I definitely would recommend adding that practice exam to your course. Just to give students an opportunity to try Honorlock once before they actually take a legitimate exam. But yeah, it really takes 30 seconds to a minute to complete the authentication, and you'll see a little bit later how quick that process is. If a family member walks into the room, will that pause the exam? So no, it would not pause the exam for a student. However, if a secondary face is detected, that would trigger an AI flag to be implemented on that student's session. And that, of course, would be reviewable for you when you're reviewing their exam. All right. Okay, so after room scan, the next option you see is manual review. That's actually that actually won't be available for you on your side, so we can ignore that. That's just an additional level of service that you are not subscribed to at this time. You're welcome. So next we have our calculator options. We have two options for you there. So you can enable an on-screen basic 4-function calculator or also a scientific calculator as well. You can choose either one. Of course, if you do not want a calculator or don't need a calculator, you can disable them both. And then we have disable copy and paste. That one's very straightforward. This will just prevent any exam taker from copying exam content and pasting it outside of their assessment if they're trying to share that information afterwards. That would prevent them from doing so. And then we next have disable printing, which prevents access to the browser's print function in order to print or export any exam content. And then next we have a browser guard. And browser guard is basically Honorlock's version of a lockdown browser. So what this will do, this will prevent exam takers from accessing additional applications outside of Google Chrome. And any attempt to access external applications will generate an automated flag to be reviewed when reviewing exam taker results as well. And then I'll get to your question in just a second. I just wanted to finish off these two here. The last two down here at the bottom, we have allowed site URLs, which if it's enabled, that is what opens up this drop-down menu here. So of course, there'll be times when you actually want your students to access something during an exam, or they'll need to watch a video, access some sort of type of information on the web. So you can add any website that you would like to allow students access during the exam here in this box. So you'll see I've added a couple of examples to kind of further explain how this works. I have youtube.com listed here. So if we have a video that students want to or need to watch during an exam, something like that, if you add youtube.com, this would actually give students access to everything on YouTube. So we go by the base URL that is listed here. So if you only want students to access a specific web page or a specific video on YouTube, you would have to be very careful about including anything that might follow a / within the URL. So that's just a caveat there to make sure you're only giving your students access to what you want them to have access to. And then lastly, we have the simulated not proctored feature, which is basically if you just want to give your students the impression that the exam is being proctored, you can enable this. They'll still have to go through all of the authentication steps, and it'll still look like a normal proctored exam while they're in that exam. However, there won't be any recording or flagging to review after the session is complete. So it's more so a mock exam situation would be for simulated not proctored, and you of course would not be charged for those exams either. All right, so let me go back to the chat here. All right, will the browser be prevented from automatic translation? Oh, okay, I got you. So you're referring to maybe students out of the country, or if they do have another language enabled on their browser. So, sorry, go ahead. I think you're
actually the question is about language, right? Teaching language, if they're translating what's written there on the target language. So sometimes the browsers are set to automatically translate everything into English.
Got you. Yeah. So yes, if they had that enabled on their browser, that would automatically be disabled prior to entering. So you wouldn't have to worry about it showing up in a different language if it's not supposed to.
Excellent. Thank you.
No problem. I think I actually skipped one here too. At what point do the live proctors begin to view the session? So there's not actually a live proctor watching the full session. So the way that process works, if a live proctor were to ever pop into a session, it would be triggered by one of our AI flags. So if our AI catches something suspicious or detects something that may be academic dishonesty, that would implement that flag, and that sends that session to our proctoring queue, or our live pop-in queue, I should say. And then what happens from there? One of our certified proctors would open the session, review that flag just to make sure that it was legitimate. The student did, show some sort of suspicious activity or suspicious behavior. And then if necessary, they would then pop in on that session, basically direct the student on how to correct that behavior and then allow them to continue. So that's how that process works there. Will this detect multiple monitor activity? Yes. So before the exam, if your student has a secondary monitor plugged into their device, they'll actually be required to remove that monitor prior to entering the exam. So that's taken care of in the authentication process. For the browser guard versus allowed sites, how does it handle websites like stat?
You answered that question, I think, so you can skip it.
Okay, sorry. Perfect. All right. Okay, so nothing here prevents students from accessing content on another device like another laptop or a mobile phone. So you are correct. There's, obviously there's no way for us to gain any insight into what other devices might be running within the student's household or wherever they are at. However, that is where you have that room scan and you have the recording of the session to fall back on. So basically, with that room scan, you can have them show anything you want, and we require the students to show a 360-degree scan. If you want them to show their desk, as you can include that in the additional instructions. I've even seen some instructors request that their students use a handheld mirror. So they hold that up and you can actually see the student's device with their keyboard, making sure they don't have any notes attached to their device like that. And then again, during the exam, you'll of course have the recording to fall back on. Now, if one of our live proctors were to ever see something like that in play during one of their review processes, they would also address anything else that they might notice as well. So that's another way that we can possibly catch another device in use. Okay. Does BrowserGuard prevent students using other browsers such as Firefox or other programs such as Discord? We'll lock them into the exam. So yes, when BrowserGuard is enabled, a student is not able to click outside of their browser while they're in the exam. So if they tried to, that would implement a flag. It'd also give them a notification at the top right that they're not allowed to travel outside of their browser. So even if they came down and opened up an application, there's no way that they would be able to get to it because we maximize and lock the exam browser at the front of their screen. Okay. You're very welcome. All right, and one more question here. So often students claim issues with Wi-Fi signal. How does Honorlock deal with that? So we are, if you ever do have, that type of issue with a student, if a student does tell you something like that, we are able to verify if that is the case or not. So you can just reach out to myself and I can verify for you if it is in fact true. Okay, and then looks like one more. So if the student leaves or moves camera position where they leave frame, will the AI flag it? Yes, so if a student moves outside of the frame of their camera, it will implement a flag on their session. So I will be explaining that here in a little bit. So when I get to the setting that affects that, you'll hear a little bit more. But yes, we do implement flags, and we would pause the student's exam if that ever took place. You're very welcome. All right. Awesome. These are great questions. It's a lot. I might be going fast, so I'm hoping you're catching my answers, but I love the engagement. So this is awesome. Okay. So moving forward onto student guidelines. So these are basically just further settings you can use to even further customize the settings for your exam, of course. There are 4 settings within this section that will affect the way that our AI functions during the exam. And those are the first 4 settings we have listed. So open book allowed, notes allowed, scratch paper allowed, and restroom breaks allowed does affect the way that our face detection works. And this kind of goes in conjunction with that last question that I was referring to. So if any one or all or a combination of all 3 of these first 3 settings are enabled, then the student will no longer be flagged nor will have their exam paused if their face is partially out of view of the webcam. Now, the reason being, of course, if open book, notes, or scratch paper is allowed, students will most likely be looking down a lot at those notes or scratch paper, whatever it might be. So we don't want to keep pausing and implementing false flags into the session just for partial face out of views. So that's kind of how that will change the function there. And then for restroom breaks allowed, if this is enabled, we won't implement a flag if they're entirely out of view of the webcam for 5 minutes or less. That is our recommended restroom break period. But if they were gone for 5 minutes or for longer than 5 minutes, we would pause the exam. We would implement that flag because they've been gone for too long. So that's how that works there. Does OpenBook also allow open ebooks? Yes, it does. So to go a little bit further into each of these, OpenBook allowed, of course, will allow exam takers to utilize a physical book or an ebook during their assessment. If allowing exam takers to use an ebook, you will need to include that link to within the whitelisted section or the allowed URL section up here. So just make sure you're including any ebooks that they might have access to in the allowed URL section, and you'll be good to go. And then next we have notes allowed, which of course allows students to reference any physical notes that they have in a notebook or a binder. Something I often see with notes allowed, you may want, if you want to like limit how many notes a student are allowed to use, that would be something to include in the additional instructions section, that they're only allowed a certain amount of pages or things like that. What if the ebook is a PDF file? Okay, so for PDFs, that can get a little tricky. If you have Browser Guard enabled on their exam and they're opening a PDF, there may be no way for them to get to it. I know PDFs can open within a new tab at certain times, but if at all possible, I would kind of shy away from using PDFs. That is if you utilize Browser Guard. If Browser Guard's not enabled, they wouldn't have any problem with PDFs. They can open, them as they wish. But yeah, if you do have Browser Guard enabled, I would try to stick to web versions of any notes that they may have, so you actually have that physical, URL. All right. Was on scratch paper, I believe. Yes. So for scratch paper allowed, another straightforward one that allows students to utilize multiple sheets of blank paper and of course a writing utensil during their assessment. And then I kind of already explained restroom breaks allowed there. If you do want to allow students any additional restroom break time, again, you can relay that to us within the additional instructions section. That's no problem at all. And even if you didn't relay it to us, there would be a flag implemented if they're gone more than 5 minutes. But of course, if you know that they're allowed to be gone more than 5 minutes, that's okay as well. Excuse me. Will this system work for team exams? That's a new one on me. I'm not too sure what that would be. Are you referring to taking it in within the same physical testing space? They're all in the same room, or is that how that would work for team exams? Okay, so a separate room. I don't want to verify one way or the other. This is the first I've been asked about team exams, so let me make a note of that question, and I'll have to get back to you on that one. My instinct tells me no, but I could be wrong. I really could be. So I'll definitely get back to you on that one. I apologize. All right. Okay, and then next we have handheld calculator allowed. So if you would rather your students be allowed to use a handheld calculator instead of using our Honorlock on-screen calculator, you can do so by enabling this setting here. Now, if you want them to use a specific type of calculator, again, you would want to relay that to your students in the additional instructions. And just a note, we would never allow students to use their cell phones as a calculator if this is even when this is enabled. Again, we have no insight into what else they might be accessing on that phone, so that's the reason we do that there. Next, we have headphones allowed, which does just that, allows students to wear headphones during their assessment. And then we have hats allowed as well, which again, another straightforward one, allows students to wear a hat or a hoodie. So I do want to make that note that they are allowed to have a hood up if this is enabled. And something that I have seen before is students will actually try to hide headphones underneath a hoodie. Let's say headphones allowed is disabled and hats allowed is enabled. So that's something to look out for there if this is the way you want to set up your exams. I recommend don't doing it that way just in case, but if you want to, it's just something to keep an eye on. And then we would never ask students to remove any form of religious headwear during an exam, even if hats allowed is disabled. And then we have take exam in a public area, another straightforward one. This allows students to take their exam in a public space like a library or a coffee shop. Now, of course, if they are taking the exam in a public area, background noise will most likely take place. So you would want to enable background noise allowed along with this as well. And then lastly, we have mobile phone use allowed. So if there is ever any instances where you want your students to be able to use their phones during an exam, you can do so by allowing this setting. All right. And you've heard me mention the additional instructions section quite a bit throughout this. Reason being, this is, in my opinion, and through my experience, one of the most important parts about setting up your Honorlock settings. This is a good example of what a detailed additional instructions section should look like. So you can get really creative in this section, and you can kind of add a wide variety of additional instructions you'd like your students to follow during their exam. The additional instructions are visible to students as well before they enter their exam, and they can access them during their exam as well. So that's kind of an extra area where you can communicate your needs to your students. And then we have accommodations, and accommodations is different in the sense that these are not visible to students, but they are visible to our support team and our live proctors in case they ever need to grant any permissions to students that have accommodations. So I do have an example of one here. John Doe is allowed to use a second monitor. So you can really put anything you would like here or any accommodations your student have here at all. Now, something to note is that any accommodations surrounding additional testing time or maybe a special testing date for certain students does not need to be included here, because we automatically piggyback off of any Canvas exam settings for special testing times or additional test time as well. So we got a couple questions here. So can we get a copy of that sample just as a framework? Yeah, absolutely. I'll in my follow-up email after this, I'll share this template with you so you have it. And then does Honorlock provide any recommended instruction language for faculty to include based on the settings chosen? So not necessarily based on the settings chosen. We do have some like recommended syllabus language that you can add to your course that I've shared with the group in like our resources and things like that, but not necessarily one specific to your settings, unfortunately, no. If you do have a specific use case that you come up with and you are confused about it, or anybody just has any additional questions, of course, I'm always available. Our support team's always available to answer any of those for you, and we might be able to provide something that you're looking for on that front. All right, and then lastly on this page here, we're cutting it close on time here, but I'll try to get through this last bit as quickly as possible, is exam visibility. I do recommend leaving this set to no. Basically, when this is set to no, students will only be able to see their exam listed in Honorlock during its availability period. If this is set to yes, they will always be able to see that exam, even if it's not available to take just yet. So if you do have students that like to work ahead, especially, and they may see the exam as available on their side, and they're able to click on launch, but it won't allow them to do so. So it could create some confusion if you have this set to yes. But of course, it's up to you as your preference. All right, is it possible to use Honorlock for some students but not others? So yes, that is possible in a couple different ways. So if you have some students that are coming on campus to take the exam, you can utilize bypass pins, which that would have to be, well, correct me if I'm wrong, we enabled the universal bypass pin for College of the Canyons. I'm correct on that, right? Maybe Chloe, if you remember, I think I remember doing that for you guys. Well, no, either way, if once I get confirmation on that, there is the ability to input bypass pins for students that come on campus to maybe take it in a testing center. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I thought I remembered that. So yeah, a universal bypass pin is in place. So your testing center should already have it. Or if students go in to take that, they can enter that bypass pin for your students. Perfect. All right, so that is it on how to enable an exam. Our last step would just be to come down here, click on Save. And once we come back to the main LTI page, you'll notice that this no longer has that enable button, and we have our results and settings options, which means that that exam is enabled. All right, so 10 minutes left on the clock. I'm going to do my best to get through this. We'll probably end up going a little bit over, but yeah, if you do have to jump, you'll have the recording at least to fall back on. So let me switch over into my student profile really quick, and I'm going to show you what it looks like for a student to take an Honorlock enabled exam. All right, and we are back. So I've logged in to Canvas as a student now. I'm going to head back into my course, and we're going to go over to Honorlock. All right, so we see all of the enabled exams that are within their availability period here listed for us to take. So we're going to use the one that we just set up there. I'm going to go ahead and click on the launch button. Now I've used this exam on numerous occasions for demos. So of course this says take the quiz again. If it is your student's first time taking the exam, they'll see the standard Canvas messaging that they should see. I'm going to go ahead and click on take the quiz again. Now, if your students do not have Honorlock's Chrome extension installed when they initially go to launch proctoring, they will automatically be taken to the Chrome Store page in order to install the Honorlock Chrome extension. As soon as they're finished, they'll be directed right back to Canvas. So it's a seamless process there. You don't have to make sure that they have it installed prior to launching. They'll be able to do so. Of course, I already have the extension installed on my device, so we went directly into the exam here. So the first page that students will see is our data collection and use policies here. We like to be very upfront about student privacy. We know it's a hot topic with a lot of students, so we provide that to them prior to even entering an exam. They just have to check both of these boxes to authorize the collection of data and agree to our terms of service in order to move forward. When they click Continue to Exam Guidelines, this is where your settings that you've enabled for the exam will be reviewable for your students. You'll see the additional instructions that I mentioned is reviewable as well. So this is what it looks like for students when they see that. It shows them what websites they're allowed to access during the exam, and then also allows them the ability to run a system check to where we're making sure that their device meets Honorlock's minimum system requirements, again, before they enter that exam, just to make sure we're alleviating as much possibility of them running into any technical issues while they're already in their exam. So I'm ready to go, and I'm going to click Launch Proctoring. And when that happens, you'll notice Honorlock's camera blade will show up here to the left of their screen on top of their browser. We give them one more opportunity to review our privacy details. Once they click I understand, that is where they'll be taken to our authentication steps. So how's it going, everybody? If you wanted to put a face to the name, here I am. This first step here is our student photo. So this is if your student photo is enabled for the exam, this is what it will look like for students. So we have a question here. Do they have to take it through the Honorlock tab, or can they launch it through modules? So no, they do not have to go through the Honorlock tab in order to launch their exam. They can launch it anywhere else within Canvas that it's available. All right, so in order to take the student photo, I'm just going to line myself up within the silhouette, click on Take Photo. Then we are moved on to our ID verification step. This tells students to make sure they're in a well-lit area, and also tells them what forms of ID we do accept. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to hold something up to your webcam and click on a button at the same time. It can actually prove pretty difficult, and I have difficulty with it at times even. So we did add this brief countdown here, so students can add a countdown to the picture. Click on Take ID Photo, and it gives them the time they need to align their ID within that space. Again, we are scanning only the name on their ID there, making sure it matches their name in Canvas. Next, we'll let students know how to complete a proper room scan here before they are taken to that step. They click on Continue. Now, I do want to make this very clear that there is no actual hard stop here, that if a student just said, hey, I don't want to do a room scan, I'm just going to skip this, they can do that. There's nothing that's going to stop them or say hey, you didn't complete a proper room scan, because remember I mentioned that our AI is pretty much deactivated during this, unless it's in reference to detecting a secondary face. So I'm going to click on Start Room Scan and kind of use this as an example of one of those scenarios. So I'm plugged in here, and it would get ugly if I tried to do a room scan here, and you don't want to see the rest of my room anyway. So I'm not going to complete one, and I'm going to go ahead and click on I'm done here. Now, that being said, it is very important to review your students' room scans, at least a few of them. Now, I'm not saying you have to go in and review every single student's room scan, but as long as you're reviewing some of those, especially any room scans that are connected to sessions that may have high-level flags on them, and just communicating that to your students that, hey, I am checking these, so make sure you're doing it. It does wonders with compliance with the room scan for sure. I assume Honorlock imports from Canvas each individual quiz setting, such as number of attempts, time allotted, audio recording. That is correct, yes. So those type of settings, those are all set up still within the Canvas exam settings, and we don't really touch anything that has to do with that. All right, so we've done our room scan here. It does give your students the opportunity to click on No and try again if they feel that they didn't complete the room scan the way that they were supposed to, but I'm going to go ahead and submit this one here. And our last step is to share our screen again with Honorlock and Chrome so we can record the student's screen. So this is just some instruction telling them that we are about to do this. When I hit continue, all your students need to do to make this button highlighted and clickable is click on the preview of their screen here. That'll highlight the share button. Once they click share, they are all done. So that's it. That's the authentication process that your students will see prior to entering an Honorlock enabled exam. They can click on Focus Test Window to get that camera blade to go away, and we're ready to go. I'm going to click on Start Exam, and the exam will load just as a standard Canvas exam should. So it looks exactly the same as a standard Canvas exam would without Honorlock, except for the fact that we do have this Honorlock student toolbar included down at the bottom, and of course our webcam window here. We have included this extra camera blade that can remain visible on top of the student's exam, just in case they do move outside of the webcam without noticing. They can look at their webcam, adjust as needed. A few things your students have access to here. In the student toolbar, they can open up this sidebar that will allow them to review those guidelines. I mentioned that they could still review these within the exam. This is where they would go to access any allowed URLs that you've set up for the exam as well. And yeah, that's it there with the guidelines. Now, get that out of the way. I don't know if you can see that, but Zoom's in my way here. There we go. All right, and then the last button here to the bottom, or the bottom right, is this minimize button. That's basically just to minimizes the toolbar altogether. Now, some students do like to maybe zoom in on their exam if they need to see it a little bit better, if they want larger font. And this submit quiz can sometimes be behind this blue bar if it's zoomed in a little too far. So they can minimize that to gain access to that button if needed. They can drag this across the bottom if they would like and expand it back. And lastly, I do want to show you where students need to go to contact our support team. So this chat bubble will be available to students on all Honorlock related pages, in their exam, outside their exam, doesn't matter, it'll be there. And they can click on this. All they need to do is input their name and school, click start the chat, and that connects them directly to one of our support agents. The majority of the time, they will not have any more than a 30-second wait, if any wait at all. All of our support agents are US based as well, and they are available 24/7, 365. So no need for students to schedule their exams, anything like that. They can take them whenever they're available. And that's it. Everything else is exactly the same as a standard Canvas exam would be. So I'll go ahead and close this out, submit this quiz. I'll take the 0. I've been getting bad grades in this course lately. So yeah, so once we submit the exam, you'll notice the camera blade. We thank the students for using Honorlock. It closes down automatically. So no extra steps in closing Honorlock other than just submitting their exam. And that's it. That is what it looks like for a student to take an exam in Honorlock. We are right at 2 o'clock. I do want to show you how to review these exam sessions, of course. So if you have to hop off, thank you for joining. Again, you'll have this recording to fall back on if you miss anything. But if you're willing to stay with me, just give me 1 second to switch back to my instructor profile. All right. I see we have some, okay, thank yous in the chat. You are very welcome. No worries, no worries. You have to hop off. I get it. I get it. All right, so I'm going to jump back in here to our course as an instructor really quickly and go back into Honorlock. And instead of going into settings, we're going to go into results to review some of these sessions here. So when I click on results, that'll take us right here. So this will give you a list of all the students that have already taken the exam. This list is sortable by a number of different categories. So you can click on show filters here. And if anybody that was on our previous training call is looking at this and saying, hey, this looks completely different, this was actually just updated today. So this is our new UI. If this was a surprise, surprise. But this is our new sorting features here. You're able to sort this by date, by these options listed here. You can sort this by the duration of a student's exam. Now, you'll never see a 20-day exam, of course, on your side. We do all sorts of testing and things of that nature, so we get some odd circumstances in here that made that show up like that. But you can sort this by the length of the exam, whatever you would like to do there. And then also by the flag level as well. So if a violation occurred, a pop-in occurred, you'll notice that brings those sessions. I don't think we don't really have any pop-ins in our test instance, of course, but if you do, that would show up if you enable that setting there. And then high, medium, and low flags as well. Right, and then, Yeah, I think that's it when it comes to sorting. So I'm going to sort this by high level flags, and I want to show you a session that I had ready. Where is it? Here we go, right here. So I'm going to use this session as an example of what what our session viewer looks like. Pause this so we don't hear any background noise. So when you click on a student's exam session for review, this is how that session viewer looks. It opens in 4 different sections. So our top left is, of course, our webcam recording of the student and their testing environment. The top right, excuse me, is the can't talk, late in the training. The recording of the student's screen. Now, when we play this, these both will play simultaneously, so you can see what the student is doing and also what is taking place on their screen at the same time. The bottom right is our event list, which here at the top shows all of the authentication steps that the student went through. If you wanted to review any one of these steps, you can click directly on that and it'll take you to that portion of the video. And that works the same when we get down here to the questions as well. So for example, we see we had some flags here on question 1. I want to review these flags. We can click directly on that question. It'll take you to that section of the exam. And then we can review those flags as they took place. So we saw a face not detected here. Again, I click on that portion of the exam, takes us there. We see that our student is gone. I don't know what happened to him, barring a visible shoulder at the bottom right. But this is what it would look like if that ever did happen. If your students left the testing environment, you would see this face not detected flag. We see this online resource access. So if I click on this, and then I'm going to actually maximize this so you can see it a little better. We see, so our student tried to access something they're not allowed to access during this exam. This "you are not permitted to access that site" Honorlock message will show up for the student. And this flag will show up for you in your review process as well. So just a few flags I wanted to show you there. Of course, any other flags that our AI is capable of detecting or any Proctor added flags would show up in here as well. And then lastly, in the bottom left, well, actually, since I have this tab open, this question tab will just show you whatever question the student is working on in the portion of the video that is currently playing. So that's what we'll show down here in the question tab. For details, this just gives you an opportunity to review any settings or additional instructions you have in place in this exam. Also, your accommodations will show up down at the bottom, so you don't have to switch back and forth between a couple tabs to review those in case you might forget. And then lastly, we have this transcript tab here. So this transcript tab will actually show you in written form, of course, any spoken word that was detected by our AI throughout the exam. So if you do have a student that likes maybe talking to themselves during the exam or something like that, and you're worried about the possibility of them actually talking to someone else that may be in the room, you don't have to listen through an entire session to catch those. You have the transcript to review there. And do you have any questions here? Yes, we do. All right, I want to answer these before I hop off. So if we allow a specific website URL, can students have that open prior to starting the exam? So yes, that is a possibility, but that really only relates to like third-party exams that have that. So basically the process that will happen, if your student has any tabs open at all prior to the exam, they will be automatically closed down when they enter the exam. That is aside from third-party exams. So you can have them open, those URLs, and to be honest, there is a possibility that it will stay open, but I just can't confirm that it would stay open. Of course, they'd still have access to it immediately when they open the exam back up, but it may be closed down automatically by our AI. And then, okay, yeah, that was the only question we had. Awesome. All right, and then the last thing I do want to show you really quick Go ahead and exit our session viewer. Here is the summary report up here at the top. So if you want a quick summary of all the students that have taken their exam and how many flags were implemented, things like that, you can open this summary report. And this can be exported into a PDF or that's shareable externally if you need to do so by clicking this summary export button here at the top right. But this will just give you a breakdown, again, of the exam guidelines, all the students that have taken the exam, and each flag and level of flag that were implemented as well. So it just gives you all of that information in one long list. And again, it's shareable externally if you wanted to share that out with anyone else. But I think that should do it. I apologize for going over time a little bit, but are there any final questions that need to be asked before we hop off here for the day? We got one in the chat. All right, so many students like to use Google to find a website, so they will have to know the URL prior, especially copy and paste is disabled. So if the URL is listed on the allowed or within the allowed sites section, they can access it directly through the student toolbar that I showed you during the student demo. So the bar that was down there at the bottom, if they click on exam guidelines, those links will show up right there on screen. So they won't actually have to memorize that website. Awesome. I really appreciate the level of engagement. Honestly, I hate getting on these and not getting any questions at all because I feel like I'm just not being paid attention to. So I really, really do appreciate the engagement. You guys have been awesome. And if there's no final questions, I don't know, Chloe, if you had anything else to add. Oh, sure. Go ahead, Claudia.
Yes, I just have a quick question. Does the system document the IP address? I might have missed that, and the location. Not that we want that, but I don't know. I'm just curious. The
Right.
IP in any other location. I know Google does that. So
yeah, if there was ever an instance where that's needed on your end, yes, I can provide that to you, but that is not visible anywhere to you or students alike on your side of things. But you know, for any emergency situations, if you know, there, God forbid, there's ever any incident that happens in a student's home or something that we see and we need that information, we can get that to you.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Austin, for joining us. We really appreciate this demo. It was really helpful.
It's my pleasure. And if any other questions come up after the fact, I'm always here. You guys are great.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good week.